if you do not have AI at front and center in your organization, helping your client navigate this landscape, you are on a long walk on a short plank.
All right, welcome to the Dial In podcast, the podcast about AI, customer service, and everything in between. I'm your host, Gadi Shamia, the CEO and founder of Replicant, and with me, Wayne Butterfield. Welcome.
Hey, Gadi, thank you, and welcome everybody. Thanks for having me.
So, Wayne, what do you do?
That's a great question. I think we have to keep these answers short, so I'll try. I am a Swiss Army knife. Okay, I am thinking about the cross section between AI, service providers, and clients. You know, how do we transform work for the future utilizing futuristic AI? Like, I guess that's kind of what I do.
So you're in a unique position to know a lot about both the customer side, the contact center, the technology companies like us, and the service provider, which in the industry people call them BPOs. So what are BPOs?
Yeah, BPOs, service providers, they are generally huge organizations who have historically taken outsourced work and done stuff with it. Everything from, mess for less to, truly transform the way that work is completed. And, they've done this over the last 20, 30 years. And I would say that we're just about to go through this next evolution of what these guys do, which is agentify work. And so they will be AI-led organizations versus human heavy organizations over the next kind of 5, 10, 15 years. So they, in short, they take our work, they have done something with it, generally saved money, and they are, I would say, at the cutting edge of agentic AI right now.
Yeah, so this will be a great topic to get to in a second. So, but traditionally BPOs were, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really want to hire that many people. I don't want to train them. They leave all the time anyway. They're expensive. I will just outsource them and have someone else make it someone else problem. Is this a good definition of the motivation for the buyer, for the customer of these BPOs in the past?
In the past, yeah, the phrase that was used was mess for less, right? So it was just take what we do, take the problem off me, and do it cheaper. And that cheaper was generally because of labor arbitrage, whether you're in the UK, the US, or other high cost locations. India was significantly cheaper. Philippines was and is, India is significantly cheaper. South America is much cheaper than North America. You get it, right? So historically, it was a labor arbitrage benefit. But that was 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, and I think it's 20 plus until today, and I think you think today is going to change, and we'll get to it in a second. But maybe before we even get there, when you talk if you now turn around and talk to a customer, uh, a contact center, customer service leader, chief customer officer that wants to outsource some of their work to a BPO, what do you tell them about how to choose a good BPO? What makes a good BPO versus an okay BPO?
Mm. And that often evolves, right? And I guess it comes down to a couple of things. What is the client looking to achieve, right? Do they want to actually transform the way that their work is done and the experience for their customer? Or are they just looking to save a buck, right? And unfortunately, depending on which organization it is, you do still get both of those deltas. Somebody who truly wants to change how their work is done, but knows that they don't have the skills, the experience, or maybe even the immediate budget to do that. And so they need support from a third party. And when I think of service providers, it could be anyone from a Genpact to an IBM to a Deloitte, an Accenture, a WNS, a HCL. There are literally hundreds of them. So first of all, you need to figure out what is it you're looking to achieve. Is it just a cost saving? Don't really care that much about the experience improvements. Not really that fussed about utilizing modern technologies. We just want to move and get labor arbitrage benefits. There's probably a set of service providers that would be happy to take that business. And then the service providers that I tend to work with are the ones that wouldn't want that business. Why? Because that is a race to the bottom. And they know that if they take that business now and don't necessarily show willing, there'll be a change of guard in that end client that will be like, right, we need a service provider that's going to transform. And they'll be like, we're happy to do that. It's like, you haven't done it for the last 6 years, we're finding somebody else. So I think it really depends on what you're looking to achieve. But for every outcome that you want, there's a 5, 10, 15 service providers who are very happy to deliver that for you.
Yeah, so when I'm talking with, if I'm a CEO of a company and I see my executive want to outsource the work of customer service, how would you answer this I mean, maybe the question of why is customer service not something you want to have as internal core competency? You didn't think of outsourcing marketing, you didn't think of outsourcing sales. How come customer service is something that you want to outsource to someone else and not and actually prevent your organization to develop its own experience and turn into its own core competency?
Well, I don't think you do. My view is that customer service needs to move from a cost center to the center of an organization. Why? Because, for the core reason that for most organizations, the only time they ever actually speak to their customers is in the contact center. And yet we've spent the last 30 years optimizing and trying to reduce the number of times we speak to our customers because we see it as a cost. I actually think it's gold. And I think it's just a pivot that we need to make. Now, there's also two things to think of. There's the completion of interactions, and then there's the strategy and ownership of your customer experience. Like, just because you outsource the conversation doesn't mean that you're necessarily outsourcing that experience. And actually, you could find that you learn a lot more about your customers after you've outsourced, because a lot of these service providers will have voice analytics, text analytics, they'll have capabilities that are there that are going to give you much more insight than you were ever able to achieve internally. Why? Because they're utilizing these type of technologies, the more cutting edge technologies. They're designed to deliver insights back to your business. This is how these organizations have had to evolve. It's value add, value add, value add. So I think it really depends. I think the customer conversation is probably the most important thing that most organizations can receive. Some organizations won't. So I think it doesn't quite answer your question, but I think there's ways and means of what you can pass on and what you can maintain ownership of. And partnership between your service provider and your internal departments is absolutely critical. High level partnerships at the C level, even more so. And I think that's what we're going to start to see as we move forward. Strategic partnerships will rule a mess for less service provider.
Yeah, and I think you touch on a really important point. I wanna challenge you a little bit because I know that your work is mostly with service providers, so it will be good to put you on the opposite side and try to think through it for other organizations. So 100% agree with you. I'm an e-commerce company. I used to be a retail company. I used to like the fact that customers come. I will have friendly people in the store, hopefully that I hired locally. They know their customers, I chit chat with them about their trip, and I loved it. I used to love this interaction. They used to be part of my value proposition. Now I moved to sell 80% online. Of course, I'm making up the scenario. And I don't really talk with customers anymore because they click on buttons on the website. For them, I'm the difference between Gap or Banana Republic or some Vuori is kind of they're all the same. They're just web pages. And then this customer calls, and there's a moment in which you can build loyalty with this customer. And it's even worse in services like DoorDash or Postmates or Uber and Uber Eats, where you literally deliver food from the same restaurant. There's really no difference. It's just at the end you get a bag that is exactly the same. Doesn't matter which service you use to deliver this bag to your house. So there's a great moment here. Yet if you look at these companies, look at Uber, just an example, same exact services, Lyft, same car, same driver, same everything. And Uber say, if you call me, I'll try to deflect you. I'll do my
Mm-hmm.
best to deflect you. I'll do my best for you to never speak with me. And I'll find other ways to connect with you. So if this is true, sorry, it's a long question. If this is true, why wouldn't Uber say, I want to be the best in the world at that? And just like I don't outsource operating my vehicles. I don't outsource marketing. I don't outsource operation. I will need to become the best in the world customer service. I have to hire the people and build it as one of the pillars of my organization. Is it just your philosophy indicates for ownership in the companies versus outsourcing?
I think, well, the Uber example is an interesting one. I hate Uber for a very specific reason. I mean, I use it all the time, but I hate their customer service specifically because they wouldn't let me speak in a really strange situation. So I actually I'm a detractor on Uber because of their philosophy around service, and I'm not necessarily alone. Yeah, each organization is different, right? They can just because you just because you outsource doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be worse. Okay, an organization like Uber is not the world's best customer experience organization, right? They are an AI company that is able to match drivers with demands, right? That's what they are at their heart, and they are amazing at that. Customer experience isn't their thing, right? For me, they should have voice, and it should be outsourced to someone who lives and breathes this type of thing. But again, every organization is different. I work with other organizations who have NPSs of 80 plus, right? All of that work is outsourced. So it's not just outsourcing doesn't mean worse. It's about the right partner for the right reasons, expecting the right outcomes, governing in the right way, okay, with the right KPIs and partnership. It's all of those things, right? You get all of those things right. It doesn't matter whether you're outsourcing to Mars,
Hmm.
okay? You're still going to get excellent results. And there's a lot of organizations that internally, because they under invest internally, the experience is worse.
So let's talk about how you find this right BPO, because if you stick to the Uber example, I happen to know they employ dozens of BPOs. Each one get a little piece of the puzzle. Many of companies, I'm not sure Uber still does that, compete BPOs against one another. So there's always tension, and you can measure same different BPOs do the same job, which is kind of the opposite of what you're saying. It's how do I get the best result for the cheapest amount? How do you think differently about outsourcing customer service in a way that is not a race to the bottom, but actually additive?
A lot of it is a race to the bottom, unfortunately. That's the reason why a lot of organizations outsource it, and why you'll hear me wax lyrical about we're doing these things for the wrong reasons. Whether it's the utilization of AI or whether it's the outsourcing of work, a lot of the time we're doing them for the wrong reasons. We're doing them purely to save money. We're not necessarily doing it to improve experience. So I think, first of all, there's a mindset thing there. Secondly, and there's a real life example. I actually had a call earlier on today with a service provider. They're one of 22 providers at Amazon. So similar to your Uber example, right? But this one's real. And Amazon put out a tender a number of years ago, about 6 years ago, to bring in potentially new scope of work. And this service provider was successful in becoming a new vendor. It wasn't an extended scope of an existing one. And their entire pitch was around outcome. We only want to charge you for a successful resolution when the experience is above a certain level. And so they are commercially incentivized to deliver exceptional service. And their claim to fame is that in something like the last 12 quarters, they have received the best experience metric in 11 of them across 22 different providers. So, again, everyone's different. Everyone does things for different reasons. There's different service providers have got, different mechanisms of being able to provide exceptional service. But a lot of it, you have to think a little bit differently. This one's an outcome based commercial that is geared exactly towards high resolution with high experience. So, their commercial model is geared around delivering exceptional experience. So again, it's around, there's no one answer. And do you know what? That same service provider no doubt provides terrible service for somebody else.
Hmm.
And again, Is it the service provider? No, it's probably the contract, the commercial agreement that was put in place, the KPIs, the client, the maturity of the client and their own, transition of work, their own knowledge bases, their own processes. There's so many things that can influence bad outcomes. And it's not always the service provider. In fact, a lot of the time, the service provider doesn't want to provide a bad service. The BPO industry would have died 30 years ago if the aim was to just get revenue.
So I want to get into actually resolution based and customer satisfaction based pricing in a second. But you mentioned the word death, so let's stick to it for a second. Paint a picture for me of how the world will look like in 2-3 years. We're definitely seeing it. AI enables automating most of what we used to call tier one customer service calls.
Mm-hmm.
Return, replace, roadside service is a lot of the calls that Replicant does today, and the technology just becomes better. So it's fair to assume, fast forward 3 years, there's almost no tier one customer service call that cannot be automated. What happened in the world of BPOs at this time, like, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe bifurcate who are the winners, who are the losers, because I'm sure it's not going to be like one answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, I think there's let's say there's three types of BPOs. So there's the ones who just do the mess for less and just do the calls. I think they're going to die out. Now it's probably not going to be 2 to 3 years because most contracts could be 3 to 5, some could be longer, right? So there's a runway for everybody. So you have those BPOs that are not really that tech advanced. They die out eventually. They get bought up. The business gets bought up. It gets transformed. Okay, number one. Number two is BPOs that are technology heavy and have pivoted towards a more AI centric future, where they are happy to cannibalize their own revenue by using technologies like Replicant as part of their portfolio. We will transform our customers for them. Okay, and then last but not least is the technology firms that are coming in and saying, and I'll use Salesforce, IBM as examples, whether like the services industry is a $2 to $4 trillion industry globally, our software revenues are X. We want a piece of that. In order to get a piece of that, we're a technology company that's trying to get into the service industry, not by deploying people, but deploying our agents and our tech. IBM's a great example of that. Where I historically did not see them as a BPO, yet they are a service provider, and they are growing a successful service provider type practice by being tech first and disrupting the market. So there's those three types of service provider. The two of them, the kind of the last couple, they are pivoting towards a more technology first, delivery of service, let's say. They will protect long term, their revenues will maintain, if not grow, because they will be able to shift from a people spend to a technology and a software spend, right? That's what those guys are going to be doing. And that will secure their future until the next evolution, when Replicant 2.0 basically doesn't just take tier one, it now starts to take tier two. It's much easier to deploy, so you don't need a third party to help you, yada, 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 right? So I think it safeguards the BPO industry for at least the next 10, 15 years.
hmm And you think that BPOs are, one thing I've witnessed in the last, so Replica have been doing what we do for 6 years now and automating calls for like 5. And what we've seen is, as people talk about the unprecedented speed, I'm 30 years in tech and I hate it every time when somebody says it's unprecedented speed, change is unprecedented. It is right now. The technology becomes so much better that for Replicant, we're in version 4. You said Replicant 2.0, we're Replicant 4.0 right now, and probably in a year from now there's going to be a 5.0 and 6.0, and these are not like a Apple version 13 to 14. These are massive changes in capabilities because of how fast AI moves. Do you think BPOs can move as fast? Are they designed to move as fast, given the fact that some of the large BPOs are 40,000, 100,000, 300,000 people organizations? They're not small and nimble.
No, they're not, but they've actually been doing it for the last 20, 30 years already. If you think about, we're on BPO, I call it BPO 4.0 right now. I already know where 4.5 is, and I can see where BPO 5.0 is. These guys I actually think are better placed because they're not doing it once, they're doing it 50 times across the client base, right? You imagine most enterprises, they're doing a lot of this thing for the first time. You think contact center, Gadi, think of WFM, think of IVRs, think of the desktop, think of all of these different technologies that suddenly are all AI infused. Contact center budgets haven't just suddenly exploded 10x. No, if anything, they've been cut. So you've now got 20, 30 different technologies that all require an upgrade in your contact center. And you've only got so much budget, so much bandwidth, etc. I almost feel like you don't have a choice in a lot of organizations but to move to a service provider who has, thankfully, created the right partnerships, got the right commercials, and is going to include all of this as part of their service offering. Now, it's not everybody, of course, but I think there's a lot more chance of the service provider having a better grip on all that's going on than there is actually of the enterprise right now because of the sheer amount of change in such a short period.
So one last question. If I'm a BPO, three kind of one soundbite, a piece of advice you'd give me in order to navigate the craziness over the next several years.
If you're a BPO,
Thinking,
okay, if you're a BPO and you need to navigate that, I think you've got to pivot, right? There is no such thing in the next 3 to 5 years as an entirely human workforce. If your business model is human first, technology never, and I don't just mean IVRs, CCAS platforms, WFM, etc. If you do not have AI front and center in your organization, helping your client navigate this landscape, you are on a long walk on a short plank. That would be, so you've got to pivot now. It's not too late for sure, and you don't have to do all the other thing is you don't have to do all this all yourself. There are experts, there are technologies. You don't have to build everything. You partner with a replicant. You partner. You work with technology providers and service providers to create and evolve. And that's that. For those who haven't done it so far, it's the only way they're going to be able to keep in the game.
Yeah, that's super insightful. Thank you for that. It was a fascinating discussion about something that people spend a lot of time thinking about, but often don't know enough about the insides of. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you everyone else for dialing in, and until next time.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.